Welcome to the second video in this short training course. This video is about making good decisions. We make decisions all the time. Many decisions are easy and can be made quickly, whereas others are both important and difficult. The information in this video applies to all decisions, whether simple or complex. However, it is particularly valuable for those important and difficult decisions. We will explain the difference between good decisions and good outcomes. We will describe the 6 dimensions that make up a good decision and are used to assess whether a decision is good or not. So, what is a good decision? Informally, a good decision is one that is logically consistent with our values, our alternatives, and the information available. These 3 elements are the foundations upon which a decision is evaluated. Our values are the goals of the decision, what we want from the decision. They are our objectives and preferences. Without knowing these values, it is impossible to judge which alternative, i.e., which choice, which course of action, is best. There must be more than one alternative, otherwise there is no decision to be made. However, for many decisions, one of the alternatives is to do nothing. Information is used to predict how well an alternative is likely to deliver on what we want. The decision is made at the point at which we take action to implement one of the alternatives. Before going further, it is important to distinguish between decisions and outcomes. As described above, a good decision is one that is logically consistent with our values, our alternatives, and the information we have. A good outcome is something that we would like to happen, a future state of the world that we prize relative to other possibilities. When dealing with uncertainty, we can make a good decision and still get a bad outcome. For example, we can decide to apply for a job that we really want, but not get it. That does not mean that we shouldn't have applied for the job. If another attractive job comes along, we should apply again. Similarly, we can make a bad decision and have a good outcome. If we decide to jump off a cliff into water without checking the depth and survive unharmed, then we were lucky. We made a poor decision and we got away with it. Unfortunately, the distinction between decisions and outcomes is not widely recognized. If a decision results in a bad outcome, the decision is often regarded as bad. If a decision leads to a good outcome, the decision is often considered to have been good, even if it only resulted from dumb luck. Hence, it is important to distinguish between the action, i.e., making the decision, and the role of chance in the resulting outcome, because it allows us to focus on what we can control, the decision. As described above, good decisions do not guarantee good outcomes. However, on average, consistently better decisions lead to consistently better outcomes. Going into more detail, there are 6 dimensions that constitute a good decision. We talked about 3 of these previously: values, alternatives, and information, which are numbers 2, 3, and 4 in the current slide. The other 3 dimensions are: number 1, an appropriate frame. There needs to be clarity on the issue, i.e., the problem or opportunity that is being addressed. This includes being clear on the purpose in making the decision, the scope, and what our perspective is, how the decision will be approached. Number 5 is sound reasoning. Alternatives, information, and values form the basis of the decision: what we can do, what we know, and what we want. Sound reasoning is needed to logically integrate these and provide the means to determine which alternative will give us the most of what we want, given the information we have. And number 6 is commitment to action. Commitment is then needed to move the decision to action. The best decision is useless if it is not implemented. A good decision is one which is good for each of the 6 dimensions. Good does not mean perfect. It means that the cost of further improvement, in terms of effort and delay, isn't worth it. It's where the value from improving the decision is outweighed by the cost. These 6 dimensions are often represented in the form of a chain. They are represented as a chain to signify that any decision is only as good as its weakest link. Any decision-making process should aim at achieving high quality for every dimension. We'll explain each of the 6 dimensions in more detail in the following slides. The frame for a decision helps us to define the problem or the opportunity we are tackling. There are a number of questions to address to determine what the appropriate frame is. Some of these may seem trivial, but they are not. Identifying the real decision to be made is very important, and the first answer to this question may well change after considering the subsequent questions. Identifying the decision maker is important, as it is that person's values and preferences that are required. In a lot of cases, it is obvious who the decision maker is. For example, for personal decisions, it is you. In a work situation, it is often you or your manager. However, for some situations, it is not at all clear, particularly for complex decisions in large organisations. The test is that the decision maker is the person who has the authority and resources required to implement the decision. The context is the setting within which the decision occurs. Understanding the context helps to clarify what the decision is all about. Suppose you are considering the decision choose a new job. If you dislike your current career, the context should be around choosing a new career. However, if you like your career but dislike your current employer or workplace, then the decision is in the context of finding a new employer. In both cases, the decision is the same, but the context is different. We need to clarify what the assumptions and constraints are concerning the decision. These need to be critically assessed to determine whether they are valid. Sometimes constraints are assumed to exist when they are not real. The scope determines what is included and what is excluded. The scope sets the boundaries around the problem. The scope can be broad or narrow. It needs to be appropriate for the situation. However, too frequently we adopt a frame without having thought it through properly, and we dive in and attempt to address what we assume the issue is. This is demonstrated in the next slide. If the frame is too broad, it may lead to a loss of focus on what the issue is. If the frame is too narrow, it may be so zoomed in that it misses what the real issue is. An appropriate frame clarifies what the issue is that needs to be addressed. Values describe what we want, what we care about. Values are the things that matter in the context of the decision. They are general in nature, such as be safe, create value, have fun, be profitable. Clear values lead to objectives, which are specific, measurable things that the decision maker wants to achieve from the decision. These objectives are the criteria that will be used to assess the merits of each alternative against. Objectives are often in the form of things to minimize or maximize, e.g., minimize cost and maximize safety. They can be hard or soft measures. For example, when buying a car, hard measures may be purchase price in dollars, fuel consumption in litres per 100 kilometres. Soft measures are subjective assessments, such as comfort and feel. These will be measured on a constructed scale, say from 1 to 5. There are often several objectives we want from a decision, and there may be conflicts between these. For example, we may have objectives of low cost and high safety which conflict, and we may need to decide how much of one objective we are willing to give up in order to get more of another. Clear values and the resulting objectives are what will be used to generate alternatives and determine the information required. An alternative is a potential way forward within the context of the frame for the decision, and as a decision cannot get better than the best alternative, it's important to develop a good suite of choices that cover the full range of what we can do. If the alternatives are not creative and compelling, it is worth developing new ones that have a better chance of delivering what is wanted. We need a minimum of 2 alternatives, as, without alternatives, there is no decision to be made. We would like an adequate number of alternatives, and that generally means at least 3 and up to 7 or more. However, more is not necessarily better, as the number needs to be manageable. The alternatives need to be significantly different rather than just subtle variations on a theme. Creative alternatives should be considered. This may require some brainstorming or other techniques to stimulate creativity. The alternatives must also work, i.e., they must solve the problem or opportunity that is being dealt with. And the alternatives need to be doable or feasible, i.e., it must be possible to implement them. To determine the potential outcomes for each alternative, we must have relevant and reliable information. Relevant information includes anything important that we know, would like to know, or should know about how the alternatives might deliver on our objectives. Reliable information is unbiased and comes from trustworthy and authoritative sources. For decision making, information connects what we can do, the alternatives, with what we want, our values, and the resulting objectives. Information has the quality of being certain, i.e., known for sure, or uncertain, i.e., some chance of being correct. Most predictions of future things are uncertain. In choosing to buy a used car, for example, we might want to know the recent sales price of other similar cars, which is certain factual information, whether the car has unknown problems, an uncertain current situation, and what the resale value might be in 2 years, an uncertain future situation. The information that we base our decisions on should be useful in the sense that it could influence our choice of alternatives. We do not need to know any information that does not impact on our objectives. Too many decisions are based on wrong or incomplete information. Consciously considering information needs and gathering useful information before we act is essential to good decision making. Reasoning is how we combine our alternatives, information and values to arrive at a decision. It provides an answer to, we are choosing this alternative because. This dimension requires bringing together the inputs of the previous dimensions to determine which alternative creates the most value. Selecting an alternative for an important decision just because it feels right is not enough. Sound reasoning requires an explanation or rationale. For example, we can say we're choosing an alternative because it is the safest option and costs no more than the other alternatives. We may back up this choice by detailing the alternatives considered, the information used, the values and objectives taken into account, and the method for combining these to arrive at the chosen alternative. Poor reasoning leads to poor decisions. For instance, people often assume that the upside is more likely and ignore the downside, e.g., I won't get into an accident, so I'll save money by not buying car insurance. At this point, we have identified the best alternative. We have a clear intention, but that is not enough. We need a commitment to action and a change of mindset from thinking to doing. If we are half-hearted about our commitment, our follow-through is usually less intense and may not achieve the best results. If there is lack of commitment, it may be because there are still some hidden objectives that have not yet been articulated and taken into account. It may be that there are concerns over uncertainties in the information. The commitment to action is usually obtained by involving the right people in the decision. This includes those who make the decision and those who will be asked to implement the decision. If there are any concerns or disagreement, these need to be sorted out before committing to the decision. So, to summarise, it is important to distinguish between decisions and outcomes. We can make a good decision and have a bad outcome, or make a bad decision and have a good outcome. However, on average, consistently better decisions lead to consistently better outcomes. The dimensions of a decision are an appropriate frame, clear values, creative alternatives, useful information, sound reasoning, and commitment to action. This is a useful checklist to run through when making decisions. A good decision is one where we have done sufficient work on each of these dimensions. It is not necessary to work through all of these for simple everyday decisions. However, it is recommended for complex decisions and those where the potential consequences may be significant. Remember the saying, act in haste, repent at leisure.